Good evening to you. I want to bring you some facts about your son or daughter when they are passing 14 years, and then by 18 years they are getting into young adulthood, and 18 to 24 is the generation that are most troubled by the upheavals of the world, and their opportunities were scuttled the most for that generation, so they are reacting the worst. But there's a peter down effect on the 14-year-old also. So what really happens at 14 years is that they begin to relate to and listen to and make decisions with their peers more than listening to their parents. And in the brain, all what their tracks have done up to that time gets adjusted, re-edited. Therefore, it is important to have learning tracks well prepared and well done, networked before the child is 14. Most parents think of brilliance after 14, but brain brilliance happens not by being born brilliant, though your IQ potential may be high according to your parents. It is by your brain being trained brilliant. So I have a book called Train Brain Brilliant. You can have it from Saraswati Bookshop or Vijitayapa Bookshop or Apeksha Bookshops. We will let you know how to get at it if you would drop me a WhatsApp to our WhatsApp number 074 211 5011. So because this age of passing 14 is so important, because at that stage they begin to take decisions on their own, on their feet, away from parents, because they are exposed to more opportunities where they have to make the decision. So parents have to get ready with them before that time to make such a decision. So I like to post to you or get this to you. These are the 7 brain tracks that any young person or adult has developed. The first track, right in the prefrontal cortex, the first track is called empathic intuitive, because what that means is how the child has understood himself because of bonding with mom first, parents and siblings and anything else. Anyone else, because empathic intuitive is how my internal world is wired, how I feel about my inside relationships, the bondings that have gone on. So a child who is empathic intuitive is confident about his insights. Then the second tract is empathic relational. That has to do with how I have developed my relationships with others. Third track is linguistic. I have said this many times before. Before the age of 3, any child can learn 2 languages by just absorption from hearing parents and siblings. This is the Good Shepherd's good design. But if you scuttle that with the digital screen, the child's speech begins to scramble and language learning ability goes down. Then the fourth functional brain track, according to Prof. Howard's classification, is the mathematical management track. That's why from young days we want to give them building blocks, puzzles, mechanoset, so that their management building tracks get built up. So these are the 4 tracks with which they do work. Then we have the next 3 tracks with which we show work: the kinesthetic track, the acoustic track and the visual track. Now if a child is on the digital screen too much, too long, the kinesthetic, acoustic and visual tracks begin to overtake the do work tracks. So you get a showbiz child always on YouTube wanting to become an influencer, but haven't developed his empathic intuitive track in internal relationship with himself, confidence about what he's able to do, empathic relational tracks, that is those whom he will relate to, and the language and the management tracks dumbed down. So we need a young generation who are able to do work and certainly show work, but we can't have them only having kinesthetic, acoustic, visual tracks being developed, overrunning the management tracks. Now I want to get you to understand from a passage the present generation of struggle and revolt in the Western cities, it became the woke culture and the cancel culture, where they put down statues of founding church fathers and so on. In our own nation, Sri Lanka, it became an upheaval against the corruption of the government, and it was the 18 to 24-year-old generation that bore the brunt of the struggle. So here is a passage that is very relevant to our time. Wisdom shouts in the street. Why do you think wisdom is shouting in the street? Because wisdom was not heard. For a long time, man majored on knowledge and brain and the science revolution, and now we are in the fourth generation since 1950. I have done these clips. I'm Dr. Lalith Mendis, and if you want any of these former clips for you to understand the background, please send a WhatsApp number to 0742 115011, and if you are abroad, then you have to add +94 74 211 5011. Then you can catch up on this. So I have said this before, from 1950 to 2020, over the 70 years, the world had a reset, and now the fourth generation that from 2000 began to feel the effects of the global planners taking over national resources. Those deleterious effects are being encountered by those who are now 18 to 22, the most affected. They find their ways for future is obstructed, so they react the most. So this wisdom shouts in the streets because man gave themselves so much for knowledge of the head, with science ruling king. Wisdom of the heart was neglected. I want to suggest that Good Shepherd has wisdom of the heart for living, and the brain and knowledge overtook everything else. We need brain, we need knowledge, but they were not balanced with reason in the heart or wisdom in the heart. So it's Blaise Pascal who said, heart has reason of which head knows nothing. So wisdom shouts in the street. She lifts her voice in the square. So these are places where the young generation interacts. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. At the entrance of the gates in the city, she utters her sayings. How long? Now there are three sociological categories in any generation. How long? O naive ones, meaning ignorant ones. So they get involved in whatever without due diligence, without due knowledge. They are called the ignorant ones. Then you have the scoffers, delight themselves in scoffing. They deny God and they scoff at God. So 1/3 of the population will be like that. They want to have a fight and a showdown with God. For all man-made problems, they want to have a fight with God. Third category are those who are morally deficient and they hate knowledge anyway. So these three sociological categories has nothing to do with social background or education level, wealth level, or whatever, because those kinds are equally involved in these three sociological categories that are defined. So what is the response of the Good Shepherd to this situation? This is what the Good Shepherd is doing. I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. More than ever before, that God will take an initiative to make His word known to this generation, which is at risk. Our experience is that this generation was hungering for spiritual reality, so they went after different kinds of spiritual reality, and now the time has come for them, their hunger to be filled. So there is a promise that God would move on this. They are make my words known to you, and then I will call, and so God will personally call them. They will hear a voice of God. There is a generation that God will directly interact. Why would He do that? Because the circumstances are so against them. And the science is so corrupted and fake, making different kinds of suggestions and laws, that when medical science get to making laws, and the MHRA, Medical Health Regulatory Authority of many countries, are bought up by the industries and the globalists, their law becomes more dictatorial than any government's law. That's what happened in the last 2 years, and this will be increasingly happening in the next years to come, more than tariff laws, more than governmental laws, more than industrial laws, and even more than the carbon print laws that the climate theorists wanted to exercise or implement on the world. They found health laws are more implementable, and circumstances can be created to have dictatorial health laws. That has been done once, it will be done again and again. So in a situation like this, when the fourth generation are the most vulnerable. So when I say the fourth generation, from 1950 we were the first generation. Then came the second generation. By 1980 there was the second generation arising, and they went through the consumerist burst and the flourishing, that we consumed as much as possible without thinking about any generation, any future generation. Then came the IT revolution, and then came the globalists taking over, because all these earlier changes began to press the world to a solution that few people better take decisions for the rest of the world, and that population explosion is the problem. So the globalists began to blend the world, blur the boundaries. Nations were Good Shepherd's idea of looking after the world, so that few oligarchs can't run over the world if nations keep their sovereignty. When nations get poverty-stricken, when world economies are driven to make nations poor, when globalists take over resources of sovereign nations, and then if health laws can impose laws to blur boundaries and minimize national sovereignty, you lose national sovereignty and globalists take over the world. That is how it was engineered. So this fourth generation is living in a global village where migration is engineered, and in a country like Sri Lanka now, 18 to 22-year-olds are made to believe that there's no hope in this nation, better migrate somewhere. While all the nations have inflation, energy problems and political instability, economic instability brought about by the procedures of the last 2 years, nations such as ours, kids are told, or kids are made to think leaving their own nation is the way for prosperity. So you have a very vulnerable generation without skills, who are prospecting and hoping for a better future somewhere, anywhere. So that's the way the migration is engineered, to disrupt families and cause people to lose their roots. So that's the generation that is scattered the world over. But for them specially, the Good Shepherd promises, I will pour out my spirit on you, I will make my words known to you, I will call and I will stretch out my hand. So he promises personally that there would be a God action for this generation that is most affected. And this has been our experience in recent times, that they are having a hunger for God, and they are finding the Good Shepherd to be reliable in their distress. So it is a time that we follow how the Good Shepherd is leading. The world is on a rundown mode. We can see that. And it's an engineered rundown. Very soon we will be told food producing increases the carbon print. Animal husbandry increases the carbon print. So this zero carbon tolerance policies will be adopted, and one thing that will happen is farmlands will be affected, and they will be proposing tissue culture, genetically engineered food, and animal husbandry will be run down in nations that are known for animal husbandry. All this is going on, all in the name of a better global village. We know the wise Good Shepherd divided the world into classrooms called the nations. This happened round about 2200 BC, when at a place called Babel, people were given different languages, because at that time also few oligarchs commanding one language became the rulership that commanded the commoners, the proletariat, the common people, to build a huge tower for their glory, that they can ascend to heaven. Futile effort, much effort went into it, and in that very area that this Tower of Babel was supposed to have been built, there's archaeological evidence of mounds of burnt bricks and bitumen used to build the tower. So it's not just fantasy or myth, it's an archaeologically proved fact that when there was one language, that helped the oligarchs, the powerful people, the Nephilim, those who fall on others and get the power, exercise their power on others. So God's solution for that was dividing the world into classrooms. Each classroom was a nation, and each nation got a language. So the idea is, no one Führer, no one global ruler can rule by dictatorship if the nations hold their territory, and if the nations look after their own people, and if the nations have shepherds becoming heads of state. So you can see that in many nations the head of state is not a shepherd. Head of state is not acting on behalf of the nation, but is acting on behalf of the global view of how few people, the global oligarchy, the elite, can run the world. So every nation-minded national leader will be ousted. That's the picture that is emerging. And health laws were used to destabilize so that no national leader could properly govern the nation, because fake health laws overran with a mandate and a diktat. So nations were destabilized, and this will be done again and again until, like in the day of Babel, a few global elite will call the shots and make the laws. So this is what the Word of God describes as Antichrist, and a day is coming, and already we can see the signs of the times in the crumbling of nations, insecurity of nations, and many nations not having a national leader who stands up for the nation. This is what we can see. Australia had a national leader who stood up for the nation, and a few months ago he was ousted, and soon as he was ousted, the person who came in, first law that was made was against family. So we can see the way the world is going. So how do we look at a solution? The Good Shepherd has promised that he can take care of anyone who calls on him. And in the nations he is moving to provide his avenues for those who would trust him. This is his promise. And he has said he is the Good Shepherd. Those who know him will not want. So when you meet a wall, what do? You can hit your head against the wall. You can retreat and hide saying there's a wall. Or you can grow tall and overcome the world, overcome the wall. So we are in a time like that we can grow tall. And he has promised he will fill our cup, he will anoint our head with oil, and he makes our table portion. This is how he works with individuals who will trust him to see each one through. So it's a time of, what shall I say, we are losing the nations as we have known. We are losing people whom we can trust in national, as head of nation, because the plans are that nations don't look after their citizens, but the nations will obey the global elite. This is how the play is going on. And recently Putin was in Iran, and Erdogan of Turkey came and met Putin. So one wonders how a NATO nation is planning and what that plan would be. So the word Armageddon was the title of a book by Leon Uris describing after the Second World War, how the Berlin Wall came up, the Great Dividing Wall. So the book was titled Armageddon, describing the Berlin Wall. But that title comes from the last book of the Bible, about a war in a place called Armageddon, where 4 world powers will converge on the Middle East. And this Armageddon is a huge valley north of Israel, where many wars have been fought. And the 4 world powers are, one is called the King of the East, who can mobilize an infantry of 200 million. Now, this was told in the 1st century. So there was no nation with a 200 million army in the 1st century. There wasn't even 200 million people. But the good book, the scripture, knew what is going to come. So now we know there are kings of the East. There's a world power in the East, China, who can easily mobilize an army of 200 million. Then the next power is described as the northern power, and that is clearly Russia, and the bears footprints and are already moving across the continent. Another power is described as the southern power, that may be the Afro-Arab nations, and another power is described as the power of the prince to come. Now this power of the prince to come is a reference to the prince that was there at the time of the book was being written, was the Roman Empire, that there would be from the geographic area of the former Roman Empire a charismatic leader arising to solve the problems of the world. He will mediate between warmongers, and that charismatic leader to me looks like the French president, arising to be a player of peace, and ultimately the one who breaks peace would be considered to be Israel. That's how the 4 world powers will converge on Armageddon. So I use the word Armageddon because secular prophets like Leon Uris, who wrote the book Exodus and the book Armageddon and many other books, identified, they brought this title to be known, but in actual fact it's the 3rd Great War that is going to come. Einstein said, I don't know with what the 3rd World War will be fought, but I know the 4th World War will be fought by sticks and stones. Will be fought with sticks and stones because the world will be in such shambles. So I want to leave these thoughts with you about the generation that is most at risk, how the Good Shepherd is recovering this generation and giving them the best proposition he has. And we also can take hope and work with this generation for their best potential, though the times outside look difficult. Thank you for listening. If you want any more of these clips, this is my 397th clip. I have spoken extensively on other subjects. You can send a WhatsApp to WhatsApp number 074 211 5011. Also, you can download my app, Golden Nuggets, from the Google Store or App Store, free of charge. Golden Nuggets. I am Dr. Lalith Mendis. My last secular post was as head of Department of Pharmacology in a state medical faculty. That is why I have written extensively on certain medical subjects also. If you need any of these topics, please do send a WhatsApp. Thank you for listening.